Hi everyone, Fari here again. So this video is going to be a quick analysis of extended response writing in science. Now in particular it will focus on essay writing, but it will also have a few tips and tricks that will help you with extended responses in other subjects if you're interested. So please ensure that you hit like, subscribe, and you also forward this video on to other people who you think may need it, as there's no such thing as having too much information. So let's begin. Now, for the most part, when you're in school, you might hear teachers using science reports, scientific essays, and scientific extended responses. The collective term that we use is an extended response, which is you have to write more than 1 or 2 sentences. Now, if you're looking at the difference between a report and an essay, essays are what you've done in the past, whereby you write an introduction, a couple of paragraphs for a body, and a conclusion. So over here, please ensure that you blow this video up if you can. We have a general overview. So an introduction of any assessment is a presentation of an idea. All right, and it often tries to hook people in and make them read a little bit more. So you need an idea of what you're going to be writing about, as well as an overview of what's going to be in said essay. Now the body is a steel paragraph. Now if you've never looked at steel paragraphs before, or your school has something different for them, then a steel paragraph uses 4 main ideas: a statement, evidence, explanation, and link. So if I were to look at these, its initial statement is the idea that your paragraph is about. It could be the sky is blue due to scattering of wavelengths bouncing off of air particles. The evidence is information that supports this, either through a secondary source or a primary source. It might be that you're talking about how oxygen and carbon dioxide particles bend light waves to within a certain wavelength that appears blue to the human eye. The explanation is talking about how this happens. So it's the mechanism that connects the statement, the sky being blue, to the evidence, collection of ambient particles like carbon dioxide and oxygen. The link is often used to try and link back to our original statement. Now, if you have access to an essay that you wrote in the past or a report that you wrote in the past, you might want to fish it out so you can use it in this video. Now, if you're writing an essay, you need a minimum of 3 paragraphs. Okay? Typically, an essay should be 1 page long. If you're doing a report, then you might start to look more at the breakdown of the scientific method, your hypothesis, your materials, your method, your discussion, your evaluation, all that jazz. Now, the essay doesn't need to include tables and graphs and diagrams, but when you get older, like in years 9, 10, 11, and 12, and you're writing more complicated essays, you will be required to occasionally use visual literacy to show this stuff. All right? Now, let's see. A conclusion is essentially 1 paragraph that ties a nice little bow to finish up your essay or your extended response. All right. It should not be bringing up any new information. It should instead be simply trying to consolidate what's already been covered. All right. Now, when you insert images, always try to put your images to the right-hand side, because in Western culture, we tend to write from the left to the right. All right. So if I'm looking at it from your perspective, you should be reading it from left to right. I'm not sure about how the camera flips things around. Okay. So always try to include a label as well. For instance, here we have diagram 1, reasons for images and extended responses. They can help the reader understand a complex process. Graphs and charts can be useful to visualize statistics. Images can serve as supportive evidences. And using the correct image in your paper can help to attract more attention. Right, these are all great reasons why we should be using it, but we need to ensure we use them properly. Now, if you're in a school where they ask you to reference your images, you might include who wrote it and when. And in your bibliography, you have a images portion that has, the proper referencing using APA or Harvard style, depending on what you're asked to use. If the image does not support what's being written, don't include it. All right. If you decide to act like a cool emoji or a picture of just like a generic background or something, don't add it. The only type of images or graphs or tables that should be used is stuff that actually supports what you have written. Now, tables and graphs that follow the same rule, but you'd use table 1 or graph 1 instead of diagram 1. Referencing. Now, referencing, as a rule, you might use websites like MyBib or Cite This For Me to help you generate stuff. It saves a lot of time. But before you start, you need to understand exactly what style is being used. Typically, most schools and universities will use either APA or Harvard style. Check with your lecturer or your teacher which style you need to use. All right. The basic format that you would have used in years 7 and 8 and 9 would be one of these two. If you're referencing a website, you have who wrote it, in brackets the date that they created it, the title of the thing, web address to find it, and when you actually accessed it. Books, similar concept. All right. But at this point in years 9 and 10, you should be beyond that. In years 7 or 8, pause this video. Have a look to ensure that your bibliography uses this stuff. All right, now this activity you might do on your own, so pause the video and have a crack at it. All right, or do it on your own and ask your teacher to have a look at it later. Now, we might look at hits, tips, and tricks a little bit later on, but for the moment, let's focus more on grammar and layout. Typically, if you're trying to set up a paragraph, you need to ensure that you can read it aloud. Reading it aloud is probably one of the best ways to ensure you're checking grammar. So, for instance, make sure that you do this when you're doing a draft copy, because that way you can identify the issues and correct them. Some people use subheadings in order to clarify their ideas a little bit more. So say you have to write something really big, you might use subheadings to isolate particular areas that focus on one type of idea. So if you're, say, looking at pollution, all right, then you might have subheadings for air pollution, water pollution, landfills, energy pollution, all right? Each one of these might have several paragraphs that talk about different things, but they're in the right area and it's easy to identify them. Now, one thing you might also do is print off a copy and mark it by hand or review it by hand. But what you need to ensure is that when you review it, you either give it to someone else who hasn't seen it before, or you review it on a day where you haven't actually worked on it. All right? 9 times out of 10, I've read through a report and I've been working on it beforehand, and I keep missing the same mistakes because I'm inherently biased. I wrote the thing, and I know what I was trying to say, but my mind keeps skipping over the same problems. Now, if I look at it on another day, I can pick up on those problems. Or if I give it to someone else, they can pick up on those problems. But ensure that you read it aloud, or you have something quick and easy like a pen that you can just draw on and say, yep, that doesn't make sense. Bibliography we covered. Questions and criteria. Now, the next part of this video, I want you to ensure that you pause it and have a look at the different ways that teachers and lecturers can question you about certain things. Depending upon the words they use, they require a certain length or a certain style of response. Now, this sort of thing has been classified using the alarm system. If your school uses something different, then by all means, clarify it using that. But let's just have a look. Now, the color coding segments that we're using here are based upon how we group these styles of words. Okay, the column next to it with the letters involved, that is an approximate length of how long that response should be, and the one next to that is explaining what it means by the actual term. So if you're looking at the first one, account is typically more than one paragraph or a paragraph long, and you are to account for, state reasons for, report on, give an account of, narrate a series of events or transactions. So in essence, you are providing a lot of information there, and it's often broken down in several stages. So pause the video if you need to, and make sure you have a copy of this. Okay. If you need to, go back, pause it again. Now the colors that we've identified here are different styles of questions. Name and define questions, the ones in blue, are often the easiest. They're just like, identify this, name that, and it's only one word answers. So that's why there's such a small percentage. The biggest ones are explain, analyze, and describe. Now these are ones where you need a moderate or a long extended response answer to it. It could be you have to write a sentence, or you have to write a paragraph, or you have to write a page. So your ability to synthesize information from inside your mind into something onto a page is crucial. It's not just about being able to identify, yep, that's a beaker, yep, that's a test tube, yep, that's a Bunsen burner, yep, that's a leaf. All right, that's easy. Anyone can do that. Multiple choice questions, one word answer questions, true and false questions, they are extremely easy, so there's not a lot of them. Or if they are not worth a lot of points. The big points, the real Godzillas, are questions like describe, explain, or analyze. Now, earlier, also had in here, using a marking criteria. If you do not use a marking criteria for your assessments, you are missing out. Marking criteria are literally gold mines of information. The whole point of you writing and submitting something is so that you can prove that you are able to understand and display a particular set of skills or information. The marking criteria is the list that we use to check for those skills and information. So if you have written something and it is not included in the marking criteria, like you're talking about, say, a certain disease, and you've gone into the history of disease, like in the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages, but that's not part of the marking criteria, and you spend a whole 2 days working on that, you've wasted 2 days of your time. If you had just looked at the marking criteria beforehand, you can know, okay, I don't need to talk about the history of it, but I do need to talk about signs and symptoms. I need to talk about treatments. I need to talk about progression of the disease. Okay? Now, planning and completion. The first 2 or 3 days when you have the assessment are critical. That is a time when you should be brainstorming ideas and doing initial research. If you have not looked at your assessment within the first 2 or 3 days, you've essentially lit a match to half your report. Okay? You need to start planning ahead. Those of you who claim that you can do it the night before and get a pass mark, I'm sure you can. But if something happens on the night before and you don't have the time to do it, then you have wasted the 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. Okay, it's not about your capabilities, it's about the fact you can't manage your time properly, or you have wasted your time. That extra time that you had beforehand could have been used to set you up so if something did happen closer to the assessment due date, then you're still going to be able to submit something and still get marks. So it's not a massive impediment to you. Okay? Now, by the time you hit the middle point, so let's say it's 2 weeks long. First 2 or 3 days, you should have already done initial research on how to brainstorm. By the time 1 week has passed, so in the halfway point, you should already have a rough draft with some basic ideas that you've cobbled together and you're starting to develop and provide more information on. Okay, you're starting to expand upon those ideas. This is when you can ask for a draft copy to be reviewed by your teacher. If you don't have a draft copy by that point, or you decide to wait till the end and you ask for a draft copy to be reviewed then, they're probably going to say no. Okay, because it takes time for them to take out of their busy schedule to look over your stuff and provide you enough information so you can go back, correct or edit it so you can get better marks. If you expect to be done the night before, it's not going to happen. All right? Word to the wise, it's not going to happen. So, 3 days away before the assessment, you should have a final draft almost complete. You're just doing the final bits and pieces, so you're editing fonts, you're moving an image around, you'll make sure the format is good, so that if something would happen, then you could, use a USB that you've stored it on, or you've saved it onto a Google Drive or a cloud format, whereby you've got a backup, and you can submit that. All right. Multiple copies is just good work, okay? Or having it somewhere where you can access from multiple sources. All right. Now let's look at a few handy tips and tricks. Reading your work aloud is never a bad idea, okay? Even if it feels weird, read it aloud. If it sounds weird, make a note of it, or highlight it, or underline it. And if you run out of breath, split your sentence up. Each paragraph should have one focus idea. If that focus idea is the statement, the first part of your paragraph, then whatever follows should only be based around that. For example, rainstorms typically happen during the colder months. Thunder and lightning are accompanying rainstorms. Rainstorms are caused due to low atmospheric pressure. Already I have 3 statements. Those 3 statements should not be in the same paragraph. Instead, I should have split them up, and for each one I should have provided evidence to support the statement. I should have gone into more detail with it. I should have linked it back to the initial statement. That's how you have a properly structured paragraph. Now, list each of the websites you use as you find them rather than retracing your steps. If you're one of those people that has like 20 tabs open on your computer, I'm sorry, your computer is eventually going to go on strike and shut down. Okay? If you have so many tabs open, then it slows the processing speed of the computer and you're more likely to run into errors. Instead, have your bibliography done first. And as you work through it, add to the bibliography. All right? Your bibliography is something you should be working on throughout the entirety of your assessment, not at the very end. Okay? Your introduction and your conclusion, you can leave those to the end because they're smaller, and once you have all the information there in the body, it's easier to develop them. But a bibliography is an accumulative document. It should be worked on throughout. This last point is something that's becoming a lot more common in today's society, so AI programs. If you're issued homework that doesn't go towards your end of your mark and your push for time, use an AI program. All right? It will help you. More to the point, you can read over what it has written and you can evaluate it. You can practice your ability to summarize or evaluate information. If you start using AI for your assessments, teachers will begin to change the assessment so that becomes no longer possible. Or we'll start using proofreading programs and software that will detect them and you'll get 0. All right? Using an AI program is the same as asking someone else to write your assessment for you. It's not actually your work. Just ask any artist out there who has to compete with AI software that generates images. All right? They will claim that all the information they use to create the image is scraping from dozens or even hundreds of thousands of different sources online to create that image. So to them, it's undermining the hard work that they've put in to develop their skills. This assessment is your chance to develop your skills. If you use an AI to do it for you, it's taking a shortcut, and shortcuts always have a cost. All right? If they didn't have a cost, then it would just be the way you did things. All right. So that's it from me. Please ensure that you have a like of our Instagram or TikTok accounts or Pinterest, as well as have a look on Redbubble to see if you like a drink bottle or stickers. But most importantly, I hope you got something from this video. If you did, or you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. As always, I've been Furry. You guys are amazing, and I'll see you around.